Hello, hello. Welcome to the Inside Support Driven podcast. Today I'm talking with Martin, and we're going to talk about joining the community. So, Martin, could you share a quick intro?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Martin Hobratschk. I'm the CEO of Cognita Knowledge Management. It is an independent knowledge management consulting firm I founded about a year ago after spending 20 years in the contact center space, doing knowledge management and managing teams and even taking calls way back in the midst of history. So I'm very familiar with all aspects of the contact center industry.
Very cool. And what's the origin story of Cognita?
Well, the last company I was working for, I was knowledge manager of knowledge management for them, and I've been brought in to basically stand up a knowledge base. At the time, they were using Microsoft OneNote as their knowledge base, and everybody hated it. And so we were able to transition them to something slightly better, which was Salesforce Knowledge, and get a good solid knowledge base set up, which allowed for a lot of improvements in the agent onboarding experience and being able to do things like chatbots and that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but they went bankrupt, and it was clear for about a year ahead of time that things were circling the drain. And so I had been out looking for other positions and just wasn't getting a lot of traction, and just decided, you know what, I'm going to go out on my own and be my own boss, something I'd wanted to do for a long time. And so that's what I did.
Very
Hung out
cool.
my shingle as an independent knowledge management consultant, like I said, about a year ago. Since then, I've written and published a book about knowledge management, and I've signed a few clients, even signed some clients that I met through the support driven community here.
Oh,
So
very cool. Very cool. And how did you come to learn about support driven? How did it get on your radar?
I was referred to it. Somebody I'm a partner with was a member of the community, and they said, "Hey, you should check this out. It's a really cool community." And so I signed up and found it really intriguing. There was already a knowledge management channel in the Slack group, and I was like, "Okay, these guys, they know what they're doing because they've got a channel already dedicated to knowledge management." So I was like, "Yeah, these are my people." Yeah, and so that's how I found out about it, and just so I signed up and just
Oh,
started joining the conversation.
cool. And do you remember like how long ago that was, roughly?
I mean, it's only been a few months. I think it was like, I want to say it was like maybe August or so,
Right.
maybe in the summer. Yeah.
Gotcha. And how did you find out that we have a knowledge management channel? Because we're not like pushing all of our channels to.
Yeah, I don't know if it was something that just showed up or somebody mentioned that it was
Mhm.
there. I think maybe there was somebody had posted about a conversation about knowledge management, said, "Hey, there's this knowledge management
Right.
channel." So yeah, that was kind of the way I found out about it, was just through just poking around.
And so how's it been to kind of be in the community for these past couple of months? What's the experience been like for you?
I think it's been really great. Like I said, I've made some really interesting contacts. I've
Mhm.
been involved in some interesting conversations around knowledge management. It's really great to see the other conversations that go on and the things that folks are posting, questions that they have, and just seeing how folks are so willing to help each other out. It's been really great.
Very cool. And are there other communities that have a knowledge management channel? Like this is my people, right? Are there
Yeah.
other places that you're connecting with your people?
Like within support driven or just kind
No,
of
no,
in
just within
general?
like knowledge management, right? Like, with other
Yeah,
peers.
there's LinkedIn to an extent. That's the kind
Mhm.
of the where I started out,
Yeah.
obviously, and just kind of doing the networking there and finding the different groups around knowledge management and
Right.
having those conversations. Now that was stuff that I was doing before I had my own
Yep.
business. And then just different types of groups that are focused on topics like AI, for example,
Mhm.
will
Mhm.
often have a good strong component of knowledge management because
Right.
so many folks are recognizing that, good knowledge management, good knowledge governance is really key to success for a lot of the AI implementations, especially the ones that customer support organizations tend to, use, right? Chatbots and that sort of stuff. And they
Right.
have to have a good solid knowledge base behind them. And so there have been a number of conversations I've had through some different, like I said, kind of
Mhm.
AI
Yeah.
focused groups where, they want to talk about knowledge management and learn more about it. That the interesting thing is that I've found
Mhm.
that not a lot of people necessarily know what knowledge management is. It's one of those things, it's like
Mhm.
they might be doing it, but they don't necessarily know what the term is. So often I talk to people, I
Mhm.
say, "Oh, I have a knowledge management consulting firm," and they're like, "Well, what's knowledge management?" So I have to explain that to them, right?
Yeah.
Customer support organizations, a lot of times they understand it, and they may even have people doing it,
Mhm.
especially in the larger kind of enterprise
Right.
corporations. When
Right.
you get to like those smaller kind of and medium-sized businesses, it's not always a discipline that is well recognized. And
Mhm.
so and so it's interesting and kind of fun to get into groups that don't necessarily have that on their radar and start talking about it and get their interest going in it.
So how do you describe it to somebody that doesn't know what it is?
Well, knowledge management, it's one of those things that I think everybody's going to have their own definition of what knowledge management is. Probably the most common thread and the definition that I tend to go to is knowledge management is about ensuring that the right people have the right knowledge at the right time.
Gotcha.
And, whatever that entails, right? It's not just about a knowledge base. It could be about communities of practice. It could be about an intranet. It could be,
Right.
so many different things, right? But
Right.
it's really about just getting people in touch with that knowledge, but also empowering them to share that knowledge because so many people have knowledge that's trapped in their heads. It's called tacit knowledge, right?
Mhm.
And you really, knowledge management, a lot of what knowledge management is, how do you take that tacit knowledge
Mhm.
and turn it into explicit knowledge?
Right.
And the phraseology that often comes up in the contact center industry, how do you take that tribal knowledge
Mhm.
and make sure that it gets shared out beyond the tribe so that
Gotcha.
anybody can find it?
Gotcha. And what are the types of problems that you help your clients with?
There's a wide range, and it's going to depend a lot on what the kind of key success indicators are for the organization. What are they really trying to achieve? What is it that they measure their success by? You really have to understand that first. But, one of the big problems that a lot of my clients have is around onboarding new employees and new agents and
Mhm.
how long it takes to ramp a new agent.
Mm. Right.
I had one client that it was taking them 12 weeks of training
Wow.
to get a new hire up to a proficiency level where they felt like, okay, they're able to do this on their own
That is a
without
long
having too
time.
many errors. They had no knowledge base, right? So they were just
Gotcha.
doing training. And again, there was all this kind of tribal knowledge, and there was people that had the knowledge, and you had to know who to go to, and
Right.
taking the time away from what you're
Right.
doing to go bug them and have them take time away. And so by building a knowledge base, we were able to shrink that onboarding time significantly from 12 weeks to about 4, right?
Very cool. Very
And so that was really rewarding.
cool.
Another area where knowledge management can be really helpful is around contact deflection and self-service, getting that knowledge that may be, again, something that's more internal and getting it into a help center or into some sort of knowledge base that's powering a chat bot, but not just being static knowledge, right? That knowledge has to be continuously updated and maintained and reviewed to make sure that it's relevant. And
Right.
so building processes to do that, because a lot of companies, what I've seen, especially for smaller and medium-sized companies,
Mhm.
is that they'll say, okay, well, we've got a knowledge base. It's our help center for our customers. And we've got 50 articles in there. We publish those
Right.
articles and
Right.
that's it, right?
So,
And they just set it and forget it.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
customers don't use it because they can't find the answers they're looking for because the
Gotcha.
problems are different than they were a year ago when you published those articles, right? And so helping companies to build the strategy and the processes to manage that and keep it fresh can really help drive that self-service. Also help with first contact resolution so that even if they do have to talk to somebody, that agent can quickly find that solution and provide that to the customer, right? Those are some of the big ones.
Gotcha.
But there's a lot of other things too, average handle time,
Right.
time to resolution, the kind of traditional metrics that get tracked a lot.
Gotcha. And so you've started your consulting practice. It's been over a year, right? So
Yeah.
how's that journey been? Has it gone as expected or how's it been?
It's gone as expected. When I did this, or when I was thinking about doing it, I reached out to my kind of first order network and talked to some folks who've been doing consulting and kind of say, here's what I'm thinking of
Yep.
doing. And they was like, well, here's what to expect. Give yourself some time. It's going to take you a little while to find
Mhm.
those clients. But then once you start doing that, it'll start progressing. And that's really been what has happened. It was a little slow for us. I did sign a client pretty early on, which was great and very affirming and gave me the impetus to
Right.
keep going. And then just, throughout the year, it's built. I've gotten some smaller kind of clients and I've expanded my network and I've been invited to be on podcasts and webinars and been invited to events and spoken in front of some groups and met potential new clients and pitched them and got them to sign the agreement. And,
Right.
so it's been a steady progression. And, there's some days where I've kind of woken up, I've got, "Ah, this is just like
Yeah.
nothing's happening, it's not going." But
Yeah.
then, something pretty soon after that will happen. Oh yeah, no, this is great.
Yeah.
This is why I'm doing it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And so you mentioned kind of like building your network. Like, what do you do to build your network? What does that look like?
A lot of it obviously is LinkedIn and just publishing there, and
Hmm.
having a good social media strategy, participating in different groups, like for example, communities like Support Driven,
Right.
and just, going in and just not trying to sell my services. I don't want to,
Hmm.
I've never been a salesperson. I don't want to be a
Right.
salesperson. I never liked that heavy sales pressure. I just go in and try to be helpful,
Hmm.
and say, hey, here's some thoughts. You have this question. Here's what I think about it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and maybe as after the conversations be going on a little bit, say, hey, if you'd like to kind of take this offline and meet, we can talk more about it,
Yep.
and kind of that way. Um,
Very cool.
I think that's a really kind of organic and helpful way to do it. It's just trying to be helpful,
Right.
and how can I be helpful to you and help you solve a problem, whether you're going to
Mhm.
bring me on as a consultant, or you just, hey, you want some
Right.
advice. I'm happy to provide that advice, right? And,
Gotcha.
and there's also kind of the networking events, both locally and then, going to
Hmm.
different,
Yeah.
symposiums and, events and that sort of stuff. I wasn't able to make it out to the Support Driven Symposium this
Yeah.
year. Just
Yeah.
didn't fit my schedule, but, hopefully next year I'll be able to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. We have a
But
knowledge management track.
yeah, I know. I saw that. I was just, I've got this new client and I'm going
Yeah.
to be super busy, so I won't be able to travel out to
Yeah.
California for that. But, but doing events like that is super helpful too. Just going and meeting people again,
Right.
finding out what they do, talking to different vendors and building relationships with them, talking to other consultants and, building
Yep.
relationships with them. It's all just kind of a constant sort of,
Hmm.
effort throughout whatever I'm doing is
Yeah.
just slowly expand that network.
Very cool. And I think you had mentioned early on that you had gotten a client through kind of being in support driven. How did
Yeah.
that happen? Like, what were the dots that kind of came that connected to make that happen?
It was in the knowledge management channel,
Mhm.
and they posted and they said, hey, we are embarking on a knowledge management initiative and we've got somebody identified to help lead us. And we're just
Mhm.
kind of curious about what's the right knowledge management certification to get.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so I weighed in and said, well, here's my opinion. Here's what I
Right.
did. Here's some other options. They're both great. Here's some differences between them.
Hmm.
And if you'd like to talk about it more, DM me.
Nice.
You know,
Nice.
they DM me and we kind of chatted back and forth. He's like, hey, would you like to get on a call and we can talk and that sort of thing. And so we were talking about that. And
Very cool.
about halfway through the conversation, they're
Yeah.
like, well, we've got some consultants who are going to come in and help us with this. And I was like, well, hey, could I submit a
Right.
proposal? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. We're going to make a decision real soon. So get it over to us real quick. Here's some information. And so I turned it around, and within a couple of weeks, they're like, "Hey, we want to go with you."
Very
And
cool.
again, so it was just this real organic thing that
Hmm.
happened just out of being helpful. I didn't go in
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, I'm going to get a consulting gig." It was just like,
Right.
"Hey, here's some help, trying to be helpful and just expand my network."
Nice.
That's what the motivation was, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And also because I don't see many people know all the channels that we have. We also have a consulting channel.
I think I've seen one there. I haven't seen. I'll
Yeah.
have to go double check and see. Maybe it's not my little dashboard over there, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's what I guess what so so clearly you're in support driven, right? You're responding to people like what I guess what's working for you, right? About like support driven. It keeps you coming back, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there's just a good level of activity.
Hmm.
I'm in several of these different, lots of different groups have their own kind of Slack channels, and some of them are more active than others.
Right.
I think the support-driven community is very robust,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of activity, a lot of folks, asking questions, a lot of people, offering their thoughts and advice, and it's just a really great active community. I think that's really key. So many of these communities I've been a part of, it's kind of like it's almost more of a broadcast thing. Just people
Mm.
post like, "Hey, we got this event coming up. We got this event coming up,"
Right.
and there's not a lot of conversations going on. But I
Right.
get the sense with the support driven that there are a good number of conversations
Yep.
happening. I think that's really key.
Yep. 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 No, you're exactly right. Because the whole, if there's one thing, right, like support driven is about people in customer support helping each other, right? So like
Yeah,
as long
yeah,
as that's happening, then we're good. If it's not happening, then we're in
yeah,
trouble.
yeah, yeah. And I like too that there's a real clear directive isn't the right word, but kind of policy that like, hey, we don't want vendors in here doing sales pitches all the time,
Hmm.
right? We've got
Hmm.
the bulletin board, you can do your stuff there,
Yep.
but don't come in and like kind of try to sell yourself in these different
Right.
channels, right? Because again, people don't want that. When I was not doing this, I was just kind of a practitioner.
Hmm.
I didn't want to see that kind of stuff,
Right.
I get it. I get it. I've never liked that kind of sales pressure, and that I don't want to be that way. And so I really like that the community is organized around that, saying, hey, don't come in here and like try to sell yourself in all these
Yeah.
different channels. It
Yeah.
just turns people off, right? And it
Yeah.
creates clutter. This needs to be conversations. And that's why I
Yes.
really is like, how can you be helpful to each other, right? It's not about, getting the next paycheck. It's like, how can you help somebody out? I
Yep.
think that spirit, is really strong within the support driven community. That's what I really like about it.
Good. That's good. And where do you see kind of way things that like that we could do better or that like we could do that we're not doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I can really think of anything, that is really missing.
Hmm.
Again, it's just so well structured, it's
Yeah.
mature, and y'all have a great selection of different channels
Hmm.
and pretty really clear rules of the road.
Yep.
For my needs and for what I'm looking for, I think y'all are hitting all the right things, right? There's not really anything missing that I, see
Yeah.
missing in some of the other groups that I'm in.
Very cool. Also, and you reminded, or I guess this came to mind recently, but because you mentioned that you're also like doing a lot on LinkedIn in terms of like posting and engaging there.
Yeah.
So we also have a content creators channel, which um, is also a place where we're trying to encourage people who are putting their time and energy to LinkedIn,
Yeah.
podcast to like come
Okay.
help each other. So if maybe you're already in it, right? But like that could be
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that. I with LinkedIn, I don't know, I kind of ebb and flow a little bit on that.
Mhm. Hmm.
And it all ties into other things like the blog on my website. I
Right.
had a newsletter, and
Yep.
and that all kind of works together. And I've really one of the best pieces of advice that I got
Mm.
early on was, kind of approach what you're doing in terms of like marketing yourself and that sort of thing
Mhm.
approach it as a scientist. Try different experiments with
Mm.
different things and see what works for you and what doesn't, because
Mhm.
what works for one person isn't going to work for another. And
Right.
with LinkedIn it's that way. It's like, okay, so how often do I post?
Yeah.
What am I posting about?
Yeah.
What's the content? Trying different things. With my newsletter, same thing. you know, how often do I post? What is the content of the newsletter?
Right.
How do I link the two? Do I post to my website, or do I have a separate newsletter through something like Substack, or do I use just the LinkedIn newsletter, or do I do something through HubSpot?
Mhm.
Trying different things and seeing what really resonates, right? And
Right.
with LinkedIn, that's been a big part of it. What really resonates, because some things you post and like
Hmm.
nobody really cares and they don't like it or comment
Right.
on it. Other
Yep.
things you post, okay, yeah, people really seem to like that. And so take a lesson from that,
Yeah.
and try to post more of that, but also trying to be authentic about it. There's a lot of AI tools out there that will
Yep.
help you craft the perfect post, but I think it's really clear to people when you're doing that. The language is
Yes.
very, it's very
Very
AI.
similar.
Yeah, it's all very similar. So, trying to do all this and use those AI tools, which can be helpful, but but also being authentic and
Right.
being myself and being in my own voice. I think
Right.
that's really what I've been trying to do more with LinkedIn lately is like, kind of be really super authentic about it, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it's kind of the same thread, being authentic and true to myself with LinkedIn, just like being authentic and true to myself with how I approach, participating in something like, say,
Right.
support driven community, right?
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on this episode. Where can people go to find out more about you?
Well, my profile in the support driven community should have the links there. You can find me on LinkedIn. I've got a website, www.cognita-km.com, where it's got all this stuff as well.
Awesome. Thank you.